The cameras were already rolling when Senator John Neal Kennedy leaned forward, adjusted his navy tie, and glanced sideways at Representative Jasmine Crockett. The panel was supposed to be a balanced conversation on education reform. Instead, it was moments away from becoming one of the most talked-about live segments in recent memory. "Congresswoman," Kennedy began, a thin smile playing at the corners of his mouth, "perhaps this particular bill is a little dense for someone without a strong legal background." There it was. The jab. On live TV. Under the hot lights. The host flinched, the room tightened. Everyone on set knew what had just happened, but no one was ready for what was about to follow. Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't glance at the host, or fumble with her notes, or even laugh it off. Instead, she slowly turned toward Kennedy, locked eyes with him, and offered a smile. One of those half-smiles that didn't reach the eyes. "I practiced law for over 15 years, Senator," she said calmly. "I've written, argued, and taught legislation tougher than this one with my eyes closed. If you'd like, I can walk you through it, slowly." There was a pause. A long one. The kind of silence that lives between heartbeats and headlines. Kennedy cleared his throat and leaned back, but the internet didn't wait. Clips of the exchange hit Twitter within minutes. The moment was already being dubbed the Crockett clapback by late-night hosts and news anchors alike. But what the internet couldn't capture, what made that moment unforgettable, wasn't the words she used. It was the look, the stillness, the quiet power of someone who had been underestimated one too many times, and had finally decided enough was enough. For Jasmine, that moment wasn't planned. It wasn't rehearsed, but it had been building for years. Growing up in Dallas, Texas, Jasmine Crockett never quite fit the mold others tried to place her in. She spoke with conviction before she even understood politics. She argued curfews like a constitutional scholar, stood up for her classmates in high school when teachers crossed lines, and wrote speeches for student protests long before she ran for office. As a young lawyer, she defended clients who had no one else. She often stood alone in courtrooms where no one expected her to win, until she did. Over and over again. With poise. With facts. With presence. And now, sitting across from a smug senator with a microphone and a smirk, Jasmine realized something. She didn't need to raise her voice to be heard. She didn't need theatrics. Her lived experience was her authority. Her silence, her stare, her restraint, it spoke louder than any insult ever could. As Jasmine finished her sentence, the other panelists didn't rush to fill the silence. The host didn't cut to commercial. Kennedy didn't fire back. For a second, the show, the noise, the performance, the politics, paused. And in that breath, millions of viewers across the country saw something rare. They saw a woman refuse to shrink. They saw a leader who wasn't afraid to speak truth to power. They saw a new kind of strength, not one that storms in with slogans or fury, but one that stands its ground with quiet confidence. And that moment, frozen on every social media feed, replayed on every news network, wasn't just about two politicians debating a bill. It was about every person who has ever been told to know their place. It was about the power of poise, the courage of calm, the radical act of staying centered in the face of condescension. Jasmine didn't come to the panel to go viral. But she did. And it wasn't because of what she said. It was because she didn't flinch. The panel ended, the lights dimmed, and crew members rushed to wrap cables and reset cameras. But Jasmine sat still for a moment longer, staring at the blinking red light of the now idle camera. Her phone buzzed on the table. Then again. And again. By the time she stepped out of the studio and into the hallway, her name was trending. Not just trending, erupting. Hashtags like hashtag Crockett Clapback, hashtag SitDownKennedy, and hashtag Poised Power were cascading through social media. News outlets were already clipping the exchange. One tweet with the caption, "When brilliance looks you in the face and doesn't need to shout," had over 400,000 likes in under an hour. But Jasmine didn't smile. Not yet. Because for her, this wasn't about going viral. This was about years of silence that people like Kennedy had expected her to sit through. Years of being talked over, misjudged, minimized. She didn't clap back to make headlines, she spoke to reclaim space. As she walked through the back corridors of the studio building, her longtime aide Earl caught up with her. "You good?" he asked, his tone light but concerned. "I'm tired, Earl," Jasmine said, exhaling. "Not just from the show. From having to prove I belong in every damn room." Earl nodded. "Well, now the world saw what we've known for years." Morning shows couldn't get enough. One network replayed the clip no less than 5 times in an hour. Conservative pundits tried to dismiss it as a dramatic overreaction. Liberal voices praised it as the most graceful takedown in modern political memory. Even Kennedy, notoriously unreachable by press, issued a short statement by afternoon. While our debate got passionate, I respect all my colleagues in Congress and remain committed to healthy discourse. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was close. Meanwhile, Jasmine's office received more than 5,000 emails by noon. Letters from high school students. Messages from retired teachers. A voicemail from a grandmother in Georgia who said she cried watching her stand her ground. By Friday, Jasmine had been invited to appear on 4 national talk shows and 2 late-night segments. She declined most of them. Instead, she went back to work. Quietly. Steadily. She met with constituents in her district, held an education reform hearing, and stopped by a local high school debate team she'd sponsored. When the students saw her walk in, they cheered, not because she was famous, but because they felt seen. One girl, no older than 15, walked up and said, "You looked like you were defending all of us." Jasmine crouched slightly to meet her eyes. I was. Not all responses were kind. Online forums accused her of being aggressive, unprofessional, too emotional. A senator even remarked anonymously to a journalist, "She's young. Maybe she'll learn not everything deserves a reaction." Jasmine read the comment and smiled, not bitterly but knowingly. Because it wasn't about deserving a reaction. It was about refusing to stay silent when silence had been used against her for too long. Back in Washington, as she walked the marble halls of the Capitol, people stopped her more often now. Not just interns or press assistants, but senior lawmakers. Some nodded respectfully. A few offered subtle thumbs up. One staffer even whispered, "You shook something loose in that room." She didn't need the attention. She didn't even want it. What she wanted, what she had always wanted, was dignity. Not just for herself, but for every woman, every minority, every underestimated soul sitting quietly in the back row, waiting for a turn that might never come unless they took it. And in that studio chair on that particular morning, Jasmine didn't ask for permission. She took her turn. Weeks passed, but the ripple from Jasmine Crockett's confrontation with Senator Kennedy didn't fade, it deepened. Political analysts dissected it. Sunday morning shows reared it in retrospectives. Professors played it in classrooms to demonstrate not just rhetorical sharpness, but the art of restraint. But for Jasmine, the power of that moment was never in how viral it went. It was in how personal it became. In her home district, a mural appeared on the side of a community center. It showed Jasmine standing firm, calm, poised. Around her, painted words like clarity, dignity, and voice swirled like a protective aura. It wasn't commissioned. It wasn't organized. It was spontaneous, like the moment itself. When Jasmine saw it in person, she grew quiet. "It's not about me," she told the local artist who came over with a paint-splattered smile. "It's about what people saw in themselves that day." And that was the truth of it. For many, Jasmine's silence in the face of condescension wasn't just political. It was spiritual. It represented the countless times someone bit their tongue in a meeting, was overlooked for a promotion, was talked down to in their own home. She had given voice to the voiceless, not with shouting but with stillness. Months later, during a televised education summit in Chicago, Jasmine took the stage again, this time as a keynote speaker. The room was packed. Cameras were everywhere. And still, she looked right into the audience with a quiet confidence. "I wasn't trying to make a point," she said, addressing the elephant in the room without naming names. "I was just tired of being expected to stay quiet while others misdefined what I know, what I've lived, and what I stand for." A pause. "And I know I'm not alone." The room erupted in applause. But again, she didn't grin. She closed her eyes briefly. Collected. Measured. Grounded. Jasmine Crockett's career didn't skyrocket overnight. She didn't suddenly become a presidential candidate. But something shifted. Doors opened a little wider. Respect came a little quicker. And her presence in every room became harder to ignore. She continued advocating for education, criminal justice reform, and voting rights, not with noise but with persistence. And every time a fellow representative began a sentence with condescension, there was always someone nearby whispering, "Don't pull a Kennedy." Her name became a verb. Her moment became a reference. But Jasmine didn't seek monuments. She built bridges. And in every meeting, every hearing, every backroom negotiation where she stood her ground with facts and poise, she reminded Washington, and the country, that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just refuses to flinch.